Okay, the third news item is also realignment focused. Everyone's kind of been tracking on the ACC over the last year and a half, because everyone's wondered if it's going to survive. Is it going to crack open completely? What's going on with Florida State and Clemson and their lawsuits challenging the ACC and the grant of rights that keeps them in the conference through 2036? Interesting development that's kind of been building over the last few weeks is that there have been kind of renewed conversations inside the ACC, especially at the presidential level, about a proposal that has been pushed from Florida State and Clemson, basically saying, hey, what if, instead of just, allotting some money and moving some of the revenue distributions around based on football success, what if we do include brand value and TV ratings and basically like how much you are bringing to the table for a media rights deal. There's also part of it, again, it's kind of like a wish list, right? This is very early preliminary negotiations, but the idea of maybe shortening the grant of rights to 2030 as well, which would align better with like the Big Ten's next deal and right ahead of the SEC's next media deal. But I think, JP, without going too far into the weeds on this, the thing that interests me is the idea that Florida State and Clemson might stay in the ACC, that this might actually be the best option for them. And they don't want to go through years and years of legal wrangling. Maybe the grass isn't greener. Maybe other people don't want to add them right now. And maybe this is the best place for them, is to stay in the ACC and kind of tweak some of the revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of looking in real time too. Like it feels like right now is a tough time for either one of those schools to be fighting and saying that they don't belong in the ACC, given what we've seen on the football field. But this idea of the ACC sticking together, I think is actually really good. It's good for FSU and Clemson. I think it's good for the ACC, and it's good for sports overall, because you do have that mostly regionality with that conference, and the history there I do think is really important. Now, the interesting thing you mentioned to me is potentially shortening the grant of rights. I think my biggest takeaway from this whole saga has been you shouldn't sign a deal that long ever. Like it is crazy to think that they would have their rights tied up for that long, as the deeper we get into this thing. And so I think if there is a way to say, listen, our grant of rights is going to be shorter, we're going to be able to get back to the negotiating table, things will be better sooner, I think that's a huge deal in this, because that was probably the biggest thing that was bothering FSU and Clemson, is like, we're stuck here until 2036 with really no recourse.
Right. And I think that that's the big question, is can you shorten that? Because that's what is tying you to the league, because it's basically all of your home games. It's your rights to all of your home games. So you could go somewhere else, but no one could see you play, and you would have no rights. So that's part of the whole debate here. And it's going to be interesting. Again, these preliminary discussions, I'm not told anything is like imminent here, but just keeping that door open that there is a possibility, because it certainly felt after the lawsuits that there was no way that these parties could all move forward together. It felt inevitable that there would be something reached. And again, the legal things are still going on right now. We'll see exactly what happens, but that is something to keep an eye on, because, I think a lot of people saw what happened with the Pac-12 after they lost USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. If you're in the ACC, if you're Cal and Stanford, you were in those meetings, right? And now you're in the ACC. You're saying, hey, we cannot lose our flagship programs. Like, let's do what we need to do for our long-term survival, is to keep them in the conference. So I think that's kind of an undercurrent as part of these conversations as well.
And I think it's the right way to approach it. Like, we think about this a lot of times from the perspective of an FSU or a Clemson, because those are the teams that a lot of people view from Saturday to Saturday. But there are the fates of a lot of other schools, and in particular, a lot of athletes that aren't seen on prime television windows, that are in the fold when we talk about these situations. And I think it is the right thing, just from a collegiate sports standpoint, to think about more than just the football impact, which has been lost in a lot of this.
Right. And again, it also brought us Cal and the Calgorithm. This is something that we did not know when the ACC decided to go to the Pacific Coast, that we would get this. We'll get to that in just a second.